I stared at my phone, reading the group text for the third time, hoping somehow the words would change. Mom had sent all the details for Madison's wedding to the family chat. Venue address in the Hamptons, dress code for the $873,000 celebration, hotel room blocks reserved under the bride's name. Everyone got their assignments. Everyone, except me. When I called to ask about my invitation, Mom's voice turned ice cold. Madison doesn't want you there, Rudy. She thinks you'll cause drama and ruin her special day. I sat there in my small apartment, staring at the phone screen, realizing my entire family had collectively decided I wasn't worthy of witnessing my only sister's wedding. The silence in my apartment felt deafening after Mom hung up. I kept replaying her words, trying to understand how we'd gotten to this point. Madison and I used to be inseparable growing up. She was only 2 years younger, but she always looked up to me. We'd spend hours building forts in our backyard, making up stories, dreaming about our futures. I taught her how to ride a bike, helped her with homework, and defended her from neighborhood bullies. Everything changed when she started dating Trevor Ashworth during her junior year at Northwestern. The Ashworth family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the Midwest, and Trevor had never worked a day in his life. Suddenly, Madison began talking differently, dressing differently, caring about things that never mattered to her before. Designer handbags replaced her worn leather satchel. She traded her comfortable sneakers for shoes that cost more than my monthly rent. I remember the exact moment I realized I was losing her. It was Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Madison had just gotten engaged, and the whole family was gathered around the dinner table at our parents' house in suburban Chicago. I was telling everyone about how proud I was of my student's latest art project when Madison interrupted me. "That's nice, Rudy. But when are you going to do something real with your life?" she said, twirling her massive engagement ring. "Teaching high school art isn't exactly building a future." The table went quiet. Our parents, both successful real estate agents who'd built their own brokerage from nothing, shifted uncomfortably. They'd always been supportive of my career choice, or so I thought. But I caught the look that passed between them, a silent agreement that maybe Madison had a point. "What I do is real," I said quietly. "These kids need someone who believes in them." Madison laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Rudy, you're 34 years old and you live in a one-bedroom apartment above a coffee shop. Trevor and I just bought a house in Lincoln Park. We're talking about starting a family soon. Real responsibilities." I wanted to tell her that I'd helped 17 kids get into art programs at state universities over the past 5 years, that I'd talked 3 students out of dropping out when their home lives fell apart, that Marcus Thompson, one of my former students, just got a full scholarship to the Art Institute of Chicago and sent me a thank you card saying I changed his life. But I could see in Madison's eyes that none of that would matter to her anymore. Over the next few years, family gatherings became increasingly uncomfortable. Madison would make little comments about my modest lifestyle and how I never really grew up. She'd ask pointed questions about my dating life, my savings account, my 5-year plan, always with Trevor smirking beside her. Our parents never said anything, but I could feel their disappointment growing. Last Christmas, when I showed up wearing a sweater I'd owned for 6 years, Madison pulled me aside. "Rudy, you're embarrassing us," she whispered. "Trevor's parents are here, and you look like you shop at thrift stores." "I do shop at thrift stores," I said. "There's nothing wrong with that." She rolled her eyes. "There's everything wrong with it when you're 36 years old and should be setting an example." But finding out I was excluded from her wedding still hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just Madison being critical. This was my entire family deciding I wasn't good enough to witness the most important day of her life. I spent the evening scrolling through Madison's social media, torturing myself with posts about dress fittings, venue tastings, and bridal shower celebrations. Every photo showed our family members smiling and celebrating. Cousins I'd grown up with, aunts and uncles who used to praise my creativity, my grandmother who taught me how to paint watercolors when I was 8. They were all there, all included in this massive celebration. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. Madison had posted a screenshot of her guest list spreadsheet, proudly showing off how organized she was. At the bottom, in small text, I could make out categories: Trevor's family, work friends, college friends, and approved family only. Approved family only. The next morning, I decided to reach out to my cousin Jake and Uncle Tom. They'd always been the most down-to-earth members of our family. Jake worked as a mechanic, and Uncle Tom was a retired firefighter. Surely they'd understand how hurt I was, maybe even share some of my confusion about Madison's transformation. I called Jake first, expecting sympathy. Instead, I got awkwardness. "Oh man, Rudy," Jake said, his voice heavy with guilt. "I was hoping you wouldn't find out this way." "Find out what?" "Madison called me last week. She explained that Trevor's family has some pretty strict rules about the guest list. Something about maintaining a certain atmosphere. She felt terrible about it, dude. She cried on the phone. My heart sank. "So you're not invited either?" "Actually, I am. Dad and I both are. Madison fought for us specifically. She said we're family, and that has to count for something, even if we don't fit Trevor's usual crowd." The silence stretched between us until I finally understood. Madison had fought for Jake and Uncle Tom, but not for me. "She gave us this whole speech about how she wishes things could be different," Jake continued, clearly trying to make me feel better. "She said Trevor's parents insisted on some kind of income requirement for guests. Something about maintaining their social standards. It's completely messed up, Rudy. We almost didn't accept, but Madison begged us. She said she needed some real family there to keep her grounded. Some real family." The words stung worse than if Jake had just hung up on me. After we ended the call, I sat in my kitchen staring at my coffee cup, trying to process what I'd learned. It wasn't just that Madison didn't want me at her wedding. She'd actively advocated for other family members while leaving me out completely. I was the only one she deemed not worth fighting for. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Rudy, honey, I heard you've been calling around the family." Her tone was carefully controlled, the way she spoke to difficult clients. "I was just trying to understand what happened." "What happened is that Madison is getting married, and it's her day. She gets to decide who's there. I don't think it's appropriate for you to be stirring up drama by calling your cousins and getting everyone worked up." "I'm stirring up drama? Mom, my own sister doesn't want me at her wedding because I don't make enough money." "How is that not already dramatic?" She sighed heavily. "Madison specifically asked that you not contact her during this stressful time. She's dealing with enough pressure from Trevor's family without having to manage hurt feelings from you too. She's planning to have a nice family dinner after the honeymoon, where you can congratulate her properly and meet Trevor's parents in a more relaxed setting. A consolation dinner. Like I was some distant acquaintance who deserved acknowledgement but not inclusion. Besides," Mom continued, "Madison mentioned that Trevor's family was very particular about the guest list. They wanted to make sure everyone there would be comfortable in that environment. High-end venues, expensive wines, conversations about business and investments. You know how you get in those situations, Rudy. You tend to stand out." The way she said it made me feel like a stain on an expensive shirt. 2 days later, the final blow came from an unexpected source. My ex-girlfriend Emma texted me, asking if we could meet for coffee. We dated for 2 years before breaking up amicably when she got a job offer in New York. She was back in Chicago for work and wanted to catch up. Over lattes at our old favorite cafe, Emma seemed nervous, fidgeting with her phone. "I need to show you something," she finally said, sliding her phone across the table. "I wasn't sure if I should, but I think you deserve to know." On her screen was an elegant wedding invitation addressed to Miss Emma Richardson and guest, Madison's wedding invitation. "I barely know your sister," Emma said quietly. "We met maybe 3 times when we were dating. I haven't spoken to her since we broke up." I stared at the invitation, trying to make sense of it. "Why would she invite you?" Emma hesitated, then swiped to show me a series of text messages. Madison had reached out to Emma 6 months ago, asking casual questions about my life. Was I seeing anyone? Was I still teaching? Had I done anything meaningful with my life lately? The most recent message made my blood run cold. I feel bad that Rudy's still stuck in the same place while everyone else has grown up. It's like he has Peter Pan syndrome or something. Mom and Dad are honestly embarrassed. We love him, but he's become the family's biggest disappointment. Emma had responded diplomatically, defending my character and my work. Madison's reply was swift. "You always were too nice. Anyway, you should come to my wedding. It'll be amazing. And maybe you can tell me if Rudy's finally dating anyone with actual ambitions. I pushed the phone back across the table, feeling like I might be sick. I'm not going, Emma said quickly. I only wanted the invitation so I could show you what she's really saying about you. She's been using me to gather information and gossip about your life. I thought you should know. That night, I lay awake staring at my ceiling, thinking about how thoroughly my own family had erased me from Madison's biggest moment. It wasn't just an oversight or a difficult decision. It was calculated exclusion based on their assessment of my worth as a person. The week before Madison's wedding, I was trying to focus on preparing for my summer break when my students surprised me with an impromptu goodbye party. They'd spent their lunch money decorating our classroom with handmade banners and had somehow coordinated to bring in a cake from the grocery store bakery. Mr. Patterson, we know you're going to Italy, and we wanted to give you something special, said Maria Santos, one of my juniors who'd struggled with confidence all year until she discovered her talent for sculpture. They presented me with a thick photo album they'd made together. Every page contained artwork they'd created for me, along with handwritten notes. Some were funny, some were heartfelt, but all of them reminded me why I'd chosen this profession in the first place. You helped me see that art isn't just about being perfect, wrote David Chen, whose anxiety had made him afraid to even pick up a paintbrush at the beginning of the semester. You showed me it's about expressing what's inside. Before your class, I thought I was stupid because I learned differently than other kids, added Sarah Mitchell, who had dyslexia but created the most beautiful abstract paintings I'd ever seen from a high school student. You taught me that different can be better. Marcus Thompson, now a sophomore at the Art Institute, had even driven down from Chicago to attend. He pulled me aside after the other students left. Mr. Patterson, I need you to understand something, he said, his voice serious beyond his 19 years. When I was ready to drop out junior year because my dad said art was for sissies and I needed to get a real job, you didn't just tell me to follow my dreams. You sat with me for 3 hours after school and helped me research scholarships. You wrote 17 recommendation letters. You even called college admissions offices to advocate for me personally. I remembered those phone calls. I'd spent my planning periods for weeks, talking to anyone who would listen about Marcus's potential. You saved my life, man. Not just my career, my actual life. I was in a really dark place, and you showed me I had value. My work at the Art Institute wouldn't exist without you. As I drove home that evening, surrounded by flowers and cards and genuine appreciation from people who barely knew me beyond the classroom, I realized something profound. My family had convinced me that I was a disappointment because I didn't make much money or live in an expensive house. But these kids, these brilliant, creative, resilient kids, saw something in me that my own sister couldn't see. I'd been saving for 3 years to take my first real vacation, a solo trip to Italy to see the art I'd been teaching about for over a decade. Madison's wedding was the same weekend I was supposed to fly to Florence, but I'd been considering changing my plans to attend her consolation dinner instead. Looking at the thank you cards from my students, I made a decision. I wasn't changing my plans. Madison had made it clear I wasn't wanted at her wedding. Well, I didn't want to attend her pity dinner either. For the first time in years, I was going to do something purely for myself. The night before my flight, I called Mom to let her know I wouldn't be available for Madison's post-honeymoon dinner. What do you mean you won't be available? She asked, her voice sharp with disapproval. I mean, I'll be in Italy, Mom. I booked this trip months ago for the same weekend as Madison's wedding. Since I wasn't invited to the wedding, I saw no reason to change my plans. Rudy, this is exactly the kind of selfish behavior that I interrupted her, something I'd never done before. Mom, with respect, there's nothing selfish about taking a vacation I've been planning and saving for. Madison made her choice about who she wants in her life. I'm making mine. She's going to be very hurt that you're not there to celebrate with her. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. She'll survive. She's got 400 other guests to celebrate with. For the first time in my adult life, I hung up on my mother. At 6 in the morning, I was standing in line at O'Hare International Airport, boarding pass in hand, when something unexpected happened. The woman in front of me turned around, and I found myself looking at someone who seemed familiar, though I was certain we'd never met. "Excuse me," she said with a warm smile, "but I couldn't help overhearing you mention Italy to the gate agent. Are you heading to Florence too?" She was probably in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, and the kind of effortless style that suggested she spent more time thinking about experiences than appearances. She wore a well-worn leather jacket over a simple dress and carried a professional camera bag. "Actually, yes. Florence first, then planning to explore Tuscany for a week. I'm Helena Morrison," she said, extending her hand. "I'm a travel blogger and photographer, heading to Tuscany for a work assignment, but also just because I love it there. Are you traveling alone?" Something about her direct but friendly manner put me at ease. "I'm Rudy Patterson. And yes, solo trip. First time in Italy, actually." As we boarded the plane together, I discovered we were seated next to each other. Helena had an easy way of drawing people into conversation, and before we'd even reached cruising altitude, I found myself telling her about my work as an art teacher and my excitement about finally seeing the masterpieces I'd been showing students in textbooks for years. "That's wonderful," she said genuinely. "There's nothing like experiencing art in its original context. The Uffizi is incredible, but wait until you see some of the smaller churches and hidden galleries. The tourists miss the best stuff." When she asked what had finally motivated me to take this trip, I hesitated, but something about being 38,000 feet in the air, headed somewhere completely new, made me feel like honesty couldn't hurt. "My sister's getting married this weekend," I said carefully. "I wasn't invited." Helena's eyebrows rose. "Wow, that's harsh. Family wedding? $873,000 wedding to be exact, in the Hamptons. Apparently, I don't meet the social standards required for attendance." I expected polite sympathy, maybe an awkward change of subject. Instead, Helena's expression darkened with genuine anger. "Are you kidding me? They excluded you because of money, more or less. My brother-in-law's family has some pretty specific ideas about who's worthy of their attention. My sister, well, she's decided to agree with them." Helena shook her head in disgust. "I see this all the time in my work. People get so caught up in creating the perfect image for social media that they forget what actually matters. Your sister's wedding sounds like exactly the kind of performative nonsense I write about." "What do you mean?" She pulled out her phone and showed me her Instagram profile. 200,000 followers, with photos from around the world showcasing authentic experiences, local cultures, and real moments rather than staged perfection. I specialize in anti-wedding content, actually. Real people living authentic lives instead of staging perfect moments for the internet. The most meaningful celebrations I've documented have been small, genuine gatherings, focused on love rather than impressing people. As she scrolled through her recent posts, I saw exactly what she meant. Photos of elderly couples celebrating 50 years of marriage in their own backyards. Young families having picnics in local parks. Artists, teachers, firefighters, and mechanics living full, rich lives without spending a fortune to prove their worth. Your sister's wedding represents everything I think is wrong with social media culture, Helena continued. But your story, a teacher who's dedicated his life to nurturing creativity in kids, choosing to explore art and beauty in Italy instead of begging for scraps of approval from his own family, that's the kind of authentic living I love to document. She paused, studying my face. Would you be open to me photographing part of your trip? Not in an intrusive way, just capturing genuine moments of someone discovering Italy for the first time. I think your story could really resonate with people who felt undervalued by their own families. I thought about it as our plane crossed over the Atlantic. A week ago, I'd felt like the family failure, the disappointment who wasn't worthy of inclusion. Now, a stranger with hundreds of thousands of followers was suggesting my story might inspire others. What exactly would that involve? Just being yourself, Helena said. Experiencing Italy authentically, talking to locals, learning about art, eating amazing food, discovering hidden places. I'd document the real moments, the genuine reactions. Your sister's probably going to post 1,000 staged photos from her wedding. We could show what a real celebration of life looks like. As our plane began its descent into Florence, I made another decision that would change everything. Let's do it. Helena had warned me that Tuscany was beautiful, But stepping out of our rental car in the hilltop town of Montepulciano, I felt like I'd walked into a painting. The afternoon light cast everything in warm gold, and the narrow cobblestone streets seemed to whisper stories of centuries past. "This is exactly what I hoped you'd see," Helena said, already taking candid photos as I stood mesmerized by the view across the valley. "That expression of pure wonder, that's what's been missing from your life." We'd spent 2 days in Florence, where Helena introduced me to a completely different way of experiencing art. Instead of rushing through the Uffizi with crowds of tourists, she took me to small workshops where local artisans still practiced traditional techniques. I watched a man who'd been restoring frescoes for 40 years explain how to mix pigments the same way Michelangelo had done 500 years earlier. "Art isn't about impressing people or proving you're cultured," the restorer, Paolo, told me in careful English. "It's about connecting with something larger than yourself, something that will outlast your small worries." Helena captured me listening intently, asking questions, completely absorbed in learning. When Paolo invited me to try mixing pigments myself, she photographed my concentrated expression as I ground lapis lazuli into the brilliant blue that had colored countless Madonna's robes. But it was in Montepulciano that everything started to change in ways I hadn't expected. Helena had arranged for us to stay in a small family-run inn owned by her friend Lucia, who'd lived in the town her entire life. Lucia's husband Antonio ran a tiny vineyard, and their daughter Isabella taught art to local children in their home. "Ah, you are the teacher from America," Lucia exclaimed when Helena introduced me. "Elena told me you work with children and art. Isabella will be so excited to meet you." Within an hour, I found myself sitting in Isabella's makeshift art studio, surrounded by 8 local kids between the ages of 6 and 14, trying to communicate through a mixture of broken Italian, enthusiastic gestures, and the universal language of creativity. Isabella spoke decent English and translated as I showed the children some basic watercolor techniques I'd learned from my own students back home. But language barriers melted away as we worked together, creating colorful landscapes of their beautiful town. "You have a gift," Isabella told me as we cleaned brushes together. "These children, they usually are shy with strangers, but you make them feel safe to try new things." Helena documented everything. Me laughing with the kids, helping a shy 10-year-old boy named Marco discover that he could paint trees that looked almost magical, celebrating when 8-year-old Sophia created a sunset that made everyone gasp. But she also captured quieter moments. Me sitting alone in the inn's courtyard that evening, looking more relaxed and genuinely happy than I could remember being in years. "You realize what's happening, don't you?" Helena asked, as we shared a simple dinner of local cheese, bread, and wine that Antonio had made himself. "I'm having the best vacation of my life?" "You're remembering who you are when you're not constantly defending your worth to people who don't appreciate you." She showed me the photos she'd taken that day on her camera. In every single one, I looked like a completely different person than the man who'd boarded the plane in Chicago. Confident, engaged, genuinely joyful. "This is what authentic success looks like," Helena said. "Not a fancy wedding or an expensive house. This is a person living in alignment with his values, sharing his gifts, connecting with others through something meaningful." That night, Helena posted the first photo from our trip on her Instagram, me teaching the local children, completely absorbed in the moment, with the Tuscan countryside glowing behind us. Her caption read, "Meet Rudy, a high school art teacher from Chicago who was told he wasn't successful enough to attend his own sister's wedding. While she's staging an $873,000 performance in the Hamptons, he's discovering what real wealth looks like. Meaningful connections, authentic experiences, and the joy of sharing your gifts with others. Sometimes the greatest treasure is found when you stop trying to prove your worth to people who can't see your value." Number authentic travel. Number real success. Number Tuscany. I fell asleep that night to the sound of church bells and Helena's quiet typing as she wrote about our day. I had no idea that photo was already being shared thousands of times, or that by morning, my story would begin reaching people around the world. The next day, we drove deeper into the countryside to visit Antonio's vineyard. He'd invited us to help with the grape harvest, which was both harder work and more satisfying than I'd expected. As I worked alongside families who'd been making wine for generations, Helena captured moments I didn't even notice. Me listening intently as an elderly woman explained how to identify the perfect grape, laughing with teenage workers who were amused by my clumsy attempts to keep up, sitting in the shade during a break with my sleeves rolled up and dirt under my fingernails, looking more content than I'd felt in years. In Italy, we have a saying. Antonio told me over lunch, in his family's kitchen. Il denaro non fa la felicità. Money doesn't make happiness. Happiness comes from good work, good food, good friends, and time to appreciate all of it. His words hit me like a revelation. My family had spent years making me feel inadequate because I chose meaningful work over high income. But here, surrounded by people who'd built rich lives through simple pleasures and authentic relationships, I felt more successful than I ever had in Madison's world of performance and competition. Helena's second post showed me working in the vineyard, with a caption that began, "While his sister spends more on flowers than most people make in 2 years, Rudy is learning about real abundance from families who've cultivated joy for generations." By our third day in Montepulciano, something unexpected was happening. Helena's phone kept buzzing with notifications, and she was getting messages from followers, asking for more details about my story. "Rudy, I need to show you something," she said over breakfast. "My first post about you has been shared over 50,000 times. People are really responding to your story." She scrolled through hundreds of comments from teachers, artists, and other people who'd felt undervalued by their families. Stories of similar rejection, messages of support, and most surprisingly, criticism directed at Madison and my parents. "This is bigger than I expected," Helena admitted. "Are you comfortable with this level of attention?" I thought about my sister, probably putting finishing touches on her perfect wedding, surrounded by hundreds of guests who cared more about her husband's bank account than her happiness. Then I looked around at the warm, stone-walled kitchen where Lucia was teaching me to make fresh pasta while humming old Italian songs. "I'm more than comfortable with it," I said. "For the first time in my life, I feel like people are seeing the real me and deciding I'm worth their time." Helena smiled and raised her coffee cup in a toast. "To authentic living and unexpected adventures." As we clinked cups, neither of us realized that my story was about to explode in ways that would change not just my life, but my entire family's understanding of what truly matters. By our fourth day in Italy, Helena's phone was constantly buzzing. What had started as a simple travel blog post had become something neither of us anticipated. "Rudy, you need to see this," Helena said, finding me in the inn's garden where I'd been sketching the morning light on the ancient stone walls. "My post about you has been shared over 200,000 times. But more importantly, look at what's happening." She showed me her phone screen, which displayed a split image that had been created and shared by one of her followers. On the left was a screenshot from Madison's Instagram, an elaborate photo of her getting ready for the wedding, surrounded by bridesmaids in matching silk robes, with professional hair and makeup artists working in a luxurious hotel suite. The caption read, "Getting ready for the most magical day with my girls. Can't wait to become Mrs. Ashworth at our dream wedding." On the right was Helena's photo of me teaching the Italian children, flour in my hair from helping Lucia bake bread that morning, completely absorbed in showing young Marco how to blend colors for a sunset painting. The contrast was stark and powerful. The split image had been shared over 500,000 times, with captions like, "Real wealth versus fake wealth," "Authentic joy versus laughing," "Performed happiness," and "This is what success actually looks like." It gets more intense, Helena continued, scrolling to show me dozens of news articles that had picked up my story. "Good Morning America wants to interview you." The New York Times reached out about a feature on class discrimination in American families. And look at this. She opened her email to reveal hundreds of messages from people sharing their own stories of family rejection, economic shame, and discovering self-worth outside traditional markers of success. One email was from a nurse in Portland. "Rudy's story made me cry because it's my story too. My family acts like I'm a failure because I chose helping people over making money. Seeing him find joy and respect in Italy reminded me that I'm exactly where I belong." Another came from a social worker in Atlanta. "I've been ashamed of my small apartment and old car for years, constantly apologizing to my more successful siblings for not living up to my potential. Rudy's courage to choose authenticity over approval inspired me to stop apologizing for a life I actually love. But the most surprising development was what was happening to Madison's wedding coverage. Helena showed me how social media users had discovered Madison's posts about the net worth requirement for wedding guests and were expressing outrage. "Look at her latest post," Helena said, pulling up Madison's Instagram. What should have been a triumphant wedding day photo was instead buried under thousands of critical comments. "Imagine being so shallow you exclude your own brother from your wedding because he doesn't make enough money." Read one comment with over 30,000 likes. "This is the most disgusting display of classist privilege I've ever seen." Read another. "That brother is out there changing kids' lives while she's spending enough money to buy a house on one party." The contrast with her brother's authentic Italian adventure makes this wedding look even more hollow and materialistic, wrote someone else. Madison had disabled comments on all her recent posts, but screenshots were circulating everywhere, and the criticism was relentless. "I need to call home," I told Helena, suddenly feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. Jake answered on the first ring. "Rudy, man, where are you? The internet has gone completely crazy. I'm in Italy, like I planned. What's going on there? Dude, you're famous. But more importantly, Madison's wedding has become a complete disaster. Half the vendors canceled yesterday after the social media backlash. Apparently, the florist, the photographer, and 2 catering companies all pulled out because they don't want to be associated with what people are calling the classist wedding of the year." I felt a sudden stab of guilt. "I didn't mean for that to happen. Are you kidding? You didn't do anything wrong. You just lived your life and let someone document it. Madison and Trevor's family did this to themselves by being horrible people." Jake filled me in on the chaos back home. Trevor's parents were facing backlash at their country club, where other members were questioning their values. Madison had lost 15 pounds from stress and was barely eating. Most of their wedding guests had seen the viral posts, and many were asking uncomfortable questions about the family's treatment of me. "The best part," Jake continued, "is that Uncle Tom gave this interview to a local news station, where he called out Mom and Dad for enabling Madison's behavior. He said our family lost its way when we started measuring people's worth by their bank accounts instead of their character." As Jake talked, I realized that Helena was recording our conversation with my permission, documenting my genuine reactions to this surreal situation. After hanging up, I sat in the garden trying to process everything. Helena found me there an hour later, still staring at the olive trees. "How are you feeling about all this?" she asked gently. "Honestly, part of me feels terrible that Madison's wedding was ruined. I never wanted that. But another part of me feels vindicated. For years, I've been made to feel like there was something wrong with me for choosing a meaningful career over a profitable one. Now hundreds of thousands of people are saying I made the right choice." Helena sat beside me on the stone bench. "Can I tell you something? In all my years of travel blogging, I've never had content resonate like your story has. Do you know why?" I shook my head. "Because most people have felt undervalued by someone they love. Most people have been made to feel like their authentic selves aren't good enough. Your story isn't just about family rejection. It's about having the courage to live according to your own values, even when the people closest to you don't support those values." That evening, Antonio's entire extended family gathered for dinner at the vineyard. Word had spread through the small community about the famous American teacher, and what started as a simple meal became an impromptu celebration. 3 generations of Antonio's family, along with neighbors and friends, created the kind of authentic community gathering that Madison's expensive wedding could never replicate. As we shared homemade pasta, local wine, and stories that transcended language barriers, Helena captured what she later called the most beautiful wedding reception I've ever photographed, even though nobody got married. Her post that night included a video of the entire group singing traditional Italian songs under string lights in the vineyard, with me clapping along, laughing, and looking genuinely at peace. The caption read, "While a sister spent $873,000 to impress people who value wealth over character, her brother found real celebration with strangers who became family. This is what joy looks like when it's not performed for an audience." By the time we went to bed, Helena's posts about my Italian adventure had been featured on major news outlets around the world. But more importantly to me, I'd received a text from my students back home. "Mr. Patterson, we saw you on the news. You're famous. We're so proud that you're our teacher. Italy looks amazing, but we can't wait for you to come back and tell us about everything you learned. Marcus says to tell you that seeing you stand up for yourself inspired him to apply for a study abroad program. You're changing lives even when you're on vacation." That night, I fell asleep to the sound of Helena typing her next article, knowing that in 2 days, I'd have to return to Chicago and face whatever consequences this unexpected viral moment had created for my family. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of that confrontation. I'd remembered who I was when I wasn't constantly trying to prove my worth to people who couldn't see my value. The flight back to Chicago felt surreal. Helena and I had spent our last day in Italy exploring Florence one more time, but now we were both anxious about what awaited us at home. She was traveling with me to document the reunion with my family, but also, I suspected, because we'd grown closer over the week than either of us had expected. At O'Hare, I was shocked to see a small group of reporters waiting near the gate. Helena had warned me this might happen, but seeing cameras and microphones pointed in my direction felt like stepping into someone else's life. "Mr. Patterson, how does it feel to have your story inspire millions of people?" called out a reporter from Channel 7 News. "Are you planning to reconcile with your family?" asked another. Helena stepped in smoothly, her media experience showing. "Rudy will be making a statement soon, but right now he's focused on returning to his students and his work as an educator." As we walked through the airport, I noticed people recognizing me and taking photos. A middle-aged woman approached cautiously. "Excuse me, are you the teacher from the Italy story?" When I nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted to thank you. My daughter is studying to be an art teacher, and my ex-husband has been telling her it's a waste of her talents. Your story helped her realize that meaningful work is more valuable than a big salary. She's not changing her major." Similar encounters happened 3 more times before we reached baggage claim. Teachers, social workers, nurses, and other people in service professions were thanking me for representing them, for showing that a life dedicated to helping others was worthy of respect and celebration. The drive to my apartment took us through my neighborhood, where I discovered that my story had become local news as well. The coffee shop below my apartment had put up a sign reading, "Home of Chicago's Most Inspiring Teacher," and the owner, Mrs. Chen, had created a small display of articles about my Italian adventure. But the real surprise was waiting in my apartment building's lobby. My principal, Dr. Rodriguez, along with 5 parents from my school. "Rudy, welcome home," Dr. Rodriguez said warmly. "We need to talk." I braced myself for consequences I hadn't considered. Had the viral attention created problems for the school? Was my job in jeopardy? Instead, Dr. Rodriguez handed me a folder full of letters. These arrived all week. Parents, former students, community members, all writing to support you and our art program. The school board met in emergency session yesterday. My heart sank. Am I in trouble? Quite the opposite. The board voted to give you a raise and to expand the art program based on the community support your story generated. We're also creating the Rudy Patterson Scholarship for students who want to pursue art education but need financial assistance. One of the parents, Mrs. Johnson, whose son had been in my class 2 years ago, stepped forward. "My kid talks about your class constantly. When we saw your story, we realized we'd been taking teachers like you for granted. This whole situation opened our eyes to how much you educators sacrifice for our children." Helena documented my shock and gratitude as Dr. Rodriguez explained that donations for the scholarship fund had already reached over $50,000 from people around the country who'd been inspired by my story. After they left, Helena and I sat in my small apartment, processing the surreal turn my life had taken in just 1 week. My phone had been buzzing constantly with interview requests, speaking opportunities, and messages from people around the world. "How are you handling all this?" Helena asked, setting up her camera to capture my first moments back home. "It's overwhelming," I admitted, looking around my modest apartment that suddenly felt both smaller and more precious than before. A week ago, I felt like the family failure. Now strangers are calling me inspirational. I don't know which version is real. Both versions are real, Helena said gently. Your family saw you through the lens of their own insecurities and limitations. The rest of the world is seeing you for who you actually are. That evening, as we worked together to organize the hundreds of emails I'd received, there was a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway, looking older and more uncertain than I'd ever seen them. "Rudy, honey, can we come in?" Mom's voice was tentative, completely different from her usual authoritative tone. I opened the door to find both parents looking genuinely shaken. Dad's eyes were red, and Mom was clutching a printed stack of articles about my story. "We've been reading everything," Dad said quietly as they sat down in my small living room. "The comments, the articles, the letters from your students. We had no idea." Mom interrupted him, her voice breaking. "Rudy, we've been horrible to you. We got so caught up in Madison's world, in impressing Trevor's family, that we forgot what really matters." Helena discreetly positioned herself where she could document this conversation while staying out of the way. "We read what that woman wrote about you teaching her daughter to believe in herself," Mom continued, "and about the boy who got a full scholarship because you believed in him when his own father didn't. We realized we've been exactly like that father, dismissing something beautiful and important because it didn't fit our narrow definition of success." Dad pulled out his phone and showed me a video that had been shared on Facebook. It was Uncle Tom's interview with the local news station, where he defended me and criticized our family's values. "Tom said something that hit me hard," Dad said. "He said that if we raised a son who dedicates his life to helping kids discover their potential, that should be our proudest achievement, not our biggest disappointment." He's right, Rudy. We've been proud of the wrong things. Before I could respond, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was Madison. She looked terrible. She'd lost significant weight, her hair was unwashed, and her eyes were puffy from crying. She was wearing sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, looking more like the sister I'd grown up with than the polished woman she'd become. "Rudy," she said, breaking down completely as soon as she saw me. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Helena captured my genuine shock as Madison collapsed into my arms, sobbing apologies. "The wedding was a disaster," Madison said when she could speak again. "Half the vendors canceled. The guests who did come spent the whole time talking about your story and questioning why you weren't there. Trevor's parents were humiliated by the negative attention, and I realized, standing there in my $7,500 dress, that the most important person in my life wasn't there because I'd decided he wasn't good enough." She pulled back to look at me, mascara streaming down her cheeks. "Do you know what I thought about during my wedding ceremony? I thought about when we were kids and you taught me to paint watercolor flowers. You spent hours showing me how to make the colors blend just right. You were so patient, so encouraging. You made me feel like I could create something beautiful." Madison sat down heavily in my old armchair. "I haven't painted anything in 8 years, Rudy. I threw away everything that made me happy because I thought success meant impressing people who don't actually care about me. Trevor's family never liked me. They tolerated me because I was pretty and didn't embarrass them at country club events. But you've always loved me exactly as I am." She looked around my small apartment with new eyes. "Your students' artwork on the walls, your books about art history, that easel in the corner where you still paint even though nobody ever sees it. This place has more love and creativity in it than my 4,000 square foot house ever has." "Madison," I started, but she held up her hand. "I need to tell you something else. Trevor and I are getting divorced." The room went silent except for Helena's quiet camera work. The whole wedding disaster made us both realize we were performing a life instead of living one. Trevor admitted that his parents pressured him to find someone who would elevate the family image, and I realized I'd been trying so hard to be that person that I lost myself completely. "We don't love each other, Rudy. We love the idea of what we thought we were supposed to be." Madison looked directly into Helena's camera. "I want everyone who's been following this story to know something. My brother is the best person I know. He's spent 15 years helping teenagers discover their talents and believe in themselves. He's changed hundreds of lives, and I threw all of that away because I was ashamed that he didn't make as much money as my friend's siblings." She turned back to me. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I know I have to earn that. but I'm hoping you'll help me remember who I used to be before I became so obsessed with appearances. I want to be someone you'd be proud to call your sister again." As my family sat in my small living room, having the most honest conversation we'd shared in years, Helena captured something beautiful. Not a perfect reconciliation, but the beginning of real healing based on truth instead of performance. 3 months after my return from Italy, I was standing in my transformed classroom, preparing for a new school year that would be unlike any I'd experienced before. The Rudy Patterson Scholarship had grown to over $200,000, funded by people around the world who'd been inspired by my story. My art program had expanded to include after-school workshops, summer camps, and partnerships with local galleries. But the most meaningful change was smaller and more personal. Madison was there, wearing paint-stained clothes and looking genuinely happy for the first time in years. "Are you sure you know what you're getting into?" I asked her as she helped me arrange supplies for my new advanced painting class. "Are you kidding? I've been looking forward to this for weeks," Madison said, holding up a set of watercolor brushes with the same excitement she'd shown as a kid. "I forgot how good it feels to create something with your hands." After her divorce was finalized, Madison had made radical changes to her life. She'd sold the expensive house, moved into a modest apartment downtown, and enrolled in art therapy classes at the local community college. More importantly, she was volunteering with my program twice a week, helping students who struggled with confidence in their artistic abilities. "You know what's funny?" Madison said as we prepared canvases together. "I spent 8 years trying to impress people who never really liked me anyway. But working with your students these past few months, seeing their faces light up when they create something beautiful, I feel more successful than I ever did in my old life." Helena, who'd become a regular fixture in our lives, documented this transformation as part of her ongoing series about authentic living. Her posts about Madison's journey back to herself had been almost as popular as my original Italy story. "This is what real change looks like," Helena had written about Madison's first art therapy session. Not a dramatic makeover or a perfect before and after photo, but someone slowly rediscovering the parts of herself she abandoned in pursuit of other people's approval. Our parents had undergone their own transformation. Dad had started volunteering as a literacy tutor at the local library, and Mom was using her real estate connections to help teachers and other service professionals find affordable housing. They'd both written public apologies that Helena published, taking full responsibility for their role in creating the family dynamic that led to my exclusion. "We raised 2 amazing children," Mom had written. "But somewhere along the way we lost sight of what made them amazing. Rudy's dedication to education and Madison's natural creativity were gifts we should have celebrated instead of trying to change." The most unexpected development came from Uncle Tom, who'd become something of a local celebrity after his passionate defense of my career choice. He'd started a nonprofit organization connecting working-class families with college-bound kids who needed mentorship and support. "Your story showed a lot of people that there are different ways to measure success," Uncle Tom told me at our first family dinner since my return, which we held in my apartment, specifically because it represented the life I'd chosen and was proud of. On this particular September morning, as I prepared for another year of teaching, Helena was documenting what she called the anniversary of my transformation. It had been exactly 1 year since Madison's original wedding date. "How do you feel when you look back at everything that's happened?" Helena asked, recording our conversation for a follow-up article she was writing about long-term impacts of choosing authenticity over approval. I looked around my classroom, which was now filled with equipment funded by donations from around the world, at Madison carefully preparing materials for her first official day as my teaching assistant, at the wall covered with thank you letters from former students who'd seen my story and written to share how my classes had changed their lives. "I feel grateful," I said honestly. "Not just for the recognition or the support, but for being forced to discover what I'm truly capable of when I stop trying to be what other people think I should be." Marcus Thompson had driven down from the Art Institute that morning to visit, bringing his latest sculpture project to show my new students. As he talked to them about following their passion despite family pressure, I realized that the cycle was continuing in the best possible way. "Mr. Patterson changed my life by believing in my potential when my own family didn't," Marcus told the attentive students. "But more importantly, he showed me that success isn't about impressing people. It's about using your gifts to make the world a little better." Helena's camera captured the moment when Maria Santos, now a senior who'd been accepted to 4 art programs on scholarship, hugged Marcus and said, "That's exactly what Mr. Patterson taught me too. I used to hide my artwork because my dad said art wasn't practical. Now I can't imagine doing anything else." As my students began their first projects of the year, Madison working patiently with a shy freshman who reminded me of myself at that age, I thought about the parallel universe where I'd attended her original wedding, smiled politely through the classist celebration, and returned to Chicago feeling smaller and more ashamed of my choices. Instead, my decision to choose Italy, to choose authenticity, to choose self-respect over family approval, had created ripple effects I never could have imagined. Thousands of people around the world had shared their own stories of choosing meaningful work over profitable work, authentic relationships over performative ones, personal values over family expectations. Helena's final post of her year-long series about my story included a photo of our entire extended family at Christmas dinner, held in Uncle Tom's modest home, where everyone contributed a dish and we played board games instead of competing over achievements. "This is what healing looks like," her caption read. "Not a perfect family, but an honest one. People who learn to value character over bank accounts, genuine connection over social status, authentic joy over performed happiness." Rudy's courage to choose himself gave his entire family permission to be real instead of perfect. But my favorite moment came at the end of that Christmas gathering, when Madison pulled me aside to show me something. It was a small watercolor painting she'd completed in her art therapy class. 2 children building a fort in a backyard, working together with intense concentration and obvious joy. "That's us," she said quietly. "Before we got complicated, before I forgot what really mattered, I painted it to remind myself that the best things in life aren't expensive. They're just real." As I looked at my sister's painting, I realized that my Italian adventure had given me something more valuable than viral fame or career recognition. It had given me back my family, transformed and honest, and committed to supporting each other's authentic selves. The greatest treasure really had been found when I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who couldn't see my value, and started living according to my own definition of a meaningful life. So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt undervalued by people who should appreciate you most? Have you ever chosen authenticity over approval, even when it was scary? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and sharing them might inspire someone else who's struggling with similar family dynamics or career pressures. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to support authentic storytelling. Subscribe for more real-life adventures that celebrate genuine success over performed perfection, and share this with anyone who needs a reminder that their worth isn't determined by other people's narrow definitions of achievement. Thank you for taking this journey with me. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful destinations are found when you have the courage to travel your own path, instead of following someone else's map. Until next time, keep creating, keep believing in yourself, and keep choosing authenticity over approval.